And now it's my great honor to introduce the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. Secretary Granholm was sworn in as the 16th Secretary of Energy on February 25th, 2001, becoming just the second woman to lead the U.S. Department of Energy. Prior to her nomination of Secretary of Energy, Ms. Granholm was the first woman elected governor of Michigan, serving 2 terms from 2003 to 2011. She was also the first woman elected Attorney General of Michigan and served as the state's top law enforcement officer from 1998 to 2002. Anyone who has seen or heard the Secretary knows that she's an enthusiastic, committed, and compelling advocate for action to address climate change in a way that's good for the economy, good for communities, good for the citizens of the United States and the world. Secretary Granholm, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. All right. Thanks, Jeff, so much. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. Especially, I think this is the 10th, is that right? The 10th annual forum, but you've had a hiatus for the past couple of years. So I know that the enthusiasm is present in this room for what you are talking about today. And I obviously want to bring the perspective of the Biden administration and hopefully in shared concern and investments with the rest of the world as well. I know there's a lot of international partners in the room. Obviously, for decades now of research and development and early deployment, early commercial deployment, that work has brought us to this moment. And I think we are really at a moment, right, Jared? I mean, there's just an amazing moment, right? And the story that Vicki was just telling is exemplary of that. First of all, it is a pleasure to follow you on the stage because, as you know, as Energy Secretary, I meet with oil and gas CEOs all the time, and I'm often, and many are moving in this direction or in a direction that is consonant with climate and clean energy, but some are not yet, and I'm trying to encourage everybody to think of themselves more as diversified energy companies and be part of this strategy to get to where we all want to go. The expertise that oil and gas companies have in the subsurface, the skills of the workforce, all of that are really just so compelling of an argument. And what Vicki has done at Oxy is to really lead oil companies to be thinking about this, not just so that Oxy can continue drilling or can make it through this energy transition by hunkering down, but so that you can thrive on the other side, that there is a commercial and economic opportunity in the leadership that you are demonstrating. So thank you for your, for pointing the way to where others might follow, and I hope they accelerate like you have. So, Vicki's leadership is an example of the bold thinking that we need, and the Biden administration has been thinking boldly as well about this. I want to share a little bit about what we are doing. The agenda for climate is facing headwinds, given what we are seeing right now with respect to oil, the crimp in oil supply and the price of gas. Obviously, that is a challenge when we are also trying to accelerate this movement toward clean, but it has never been more essential, obviously, to the U.S.'s, to the world's long-term health than to address the issue of climate change and decarbonizing than ever before. So if we think about, of course, what's happening in the world of energy today with Putin's invasion of Ukraine, with the pandemic and the constriction in supply, the reduction in demand, causing these prices to go in the U.S. over $5 a gallon, obviously, if we were in, I don't know if there are folks here from Canada, but it's over $6 per gallon equivalent. If you were from Europe, it's around $8 a gallon, depending on the country that you're coming from. If you were in Singapore, it'd be about $9 per gallon equivalent. This is obviously a global issue, so everyone has to be addressing this, and it's causing families to really hurt across the world. And so at the same time as we have that challenge, we've obviously got the climate challenge, and that imperative is an imperative that does not go on hold when there is a war or when there is a recession, when there is a pandemic. Every month we hear the exhortations, the warnings from the UN, but we don't even need the warnings from the UN. I mean, you know, the fact that Montana is seeing a 500-year flood and that Yosemite is closing down for the season. This is not a 500-year flood. We have these, you know, this is a 100-year, you know, event. It is not anymore. These are accelerating, as we're all seeing. All you have to do is look at this past week. 120 million Americans are under a heat advisory. Not just a heat advisory, a warning. I mean, this is happening all the time. Last year, the US had to pay $148 billion just to clean up after these extreme weather events. So, you know, the math on the carbon budget is simple. We have got to reduce by 50% our CO2 emissions by 2030 if we have a hope of at least making, avoiding the worst of climate change. So I do know that there still is hope that we can address climate change, we can address our security, energy security, national security, and we can recover from the pandemic all at the same time, and that hope really lies in zero carbon technology. That's where the hope is. So since President Biden's inauguration, this administration has been really making innovation and deployment a top priority. We are pursuing these very ambitious goals, most ambitious in history, which is to reduce our CO2 emissions in half by 2030, 100% clean electricity by 2035, and net zero carbon emissions by 2050. That's what it is. And meeting those goals, by the way, you've got a whole industry that is being created right now in this notion of removing, capturing and removing carbon, but that's just one subset of the millions of jobs that are going to be created as we move to address climate change. And everybody, not everybody, 70 countries see this opportunity. 70 countries, representing actually about 70% of the world's population. They've all made their net zero carbon goals, right? So net zero economy goals. So we know that it's not just one solution. We know that we need a broad range of technologies to achieve our goals of net zero. And some of them are ready to go right now. Solar as an example, wind as an example, electric vehicles as an example. But we also know that solar and wind, in order to be clean, dispatchable base load, essentially, they need storage, and we're still working on those technologies. The renewable options are a priority. They are our priority. But renewable options alone are not going to cut it. We're not going to get there. It won't allow us to be able to get the speed in decarbonizing that we need, as well as the scale and the cost. And obviously generating renewable doesn't address the emissions reductions that we need to achieve. So all of that needs to come together. And the client science on this, I know you know this, but I feel like we all have to continue to say that the client science on this is unequivocal. That yes, we need to accelerate clean generation, and yes, we need to decarbonize, because of course, the goal of getting to 1.5 centigrade to meet the Paris agreements, it just can't happen without carbon removal. It can't happen without carbon capture. You know, the International Energy Agency has projected that by 2030, we've got to be locking away 1.15 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide. That's 30 times what the world is currently doing. We got to get cracking, as my mother would say. We have just got to get moving. And that's why President Biden considers deploying a key strategy for meeting those goals. And it's why the carbon capture and removal technologies are a priority. So he did make this clear in his campaign. He's made it clear in this administration. And I know it leaves some folks uneasy. You know, we know this. We've heard it all. We've heard about the skepticism related to these technologies. I've certainly heard the criticisms of it, that carbon capture is a distraction, or that it just delays the tough choices that we need to make regarding going all renewable, for example. And I get it. I get why people feel this huge sense of urgency, but ultimately, carbon management technologies offer us tools. And like a hammer or a hatchet, these tools are only as helpful or hurtful depending on how carefully or responsibly you use them, to your last point that you were making, Vicki. So there is just no question that we have to make sure that our use of the tools of these technologies won't cause harm to communities. Really important that we do this in a responsible way, and really important that we telegraph how important it is that we use the tools, because decarbonizing steel and cement and chemicals and aviation, making sure, and agriculture, I mean, things that we cannot live without, and yet whose carbon emissions we cannot live with. So generating clean hydrogen, opening the door to low carbon transportation fuel, energy storage, 24/7, baseload power, all of that are cracked open by these tools, right? So repositioning, in addition to that, today's fossil energy companies like Oxy into more diverse energy and carbon management companies, super important for them, super important, more important for their workers who have powered this nation for over 100 years and who we want to see powering this nation for the next 100 years as well, but in clean. We can do this. We can use these carbon technology, carbon management tools to unlock really great opportunities for communities across the country that have powered us and should power us into the future. So we've taken some important steps in the past 18 months or so. We brought in the person who literally wrote the book on carbon capture, Dr. Jen Wilcox, who helped to lead our Office of Fossil Energy, and then we transformed it into our Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management. And that office's central focus has shifted from really extraction of fossil fuels and focusing on more and more and more extraction to making sure we use these technologies to extract in a responsible way that minimizes the climate impact, and also invest in the technologies that will remove CO2. So this office, the Fossil Energy and Carbon Management Office, has invested billions of dollars in carbon management technologies, and they've invested, and I'm sure they've partnered with some in this room, on demonstration projects that demonstrate the viability of geologic storage, the safety of geologic storage, and as well, they have also invested and overseen the billions of dollars and lots of millions of tons of carbon dioxide underground. So it's important that that frame sits as we continue to evolve that office. In the years ahead, they're going to focus on the horizons of this space. Vicki was talking about the price coming down, right? So we have a carbon removal shot, an earth shot. We've got 3 energy earth shots. We had a sun shot back in the Obama administration to bring down the price of solar. We now have a carbon removal shot, which is the third of our ambitious energy earth shots. And the goal there is to achieve durable and scalable carbon dioxide removal for less than $100 per net metric ton within a decade. And so maybe you're more bullish. Maybe it's going to be sooner. All right, all right. Well, next month, I hope you'll all join us for our Carbon Removal Shot Summit, which is going to help us to hear what the challenges are and start to knock them down. What is it that we need to focus on? What vectors do we need to really push on to bring the price down and to allow that to scale? So that's obviously the long-term strategy. The most impactful work that we're doing right now is in the short term, which is thanks to President Biden's Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. The Department of Energy actually has $12 billion to invest in next generation carbon capture, direct air capture, carbon management technologies. And that includes CO2 transport and obviously storage infrastructure. And I know Brad Crabtree, my colleague, who serves as our Assistant Secretary for the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management. I think you're going to be talking about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law pieces that the Department of Energy will be putting out funding opportunity announcements on and requests for information. He'll share some detail about those projects. But the core takeaway is that we in this administration are utterly committed to making this technology a very important part of our goal to get to net zero by 2050. And it also means that in getting this technology to work and taking it to scale and deploying it at scale, making sure it's cost effective, we know that we're only going to be able to do this with key partners. That means key partners inside the United States, key partners outside of the United States, my counterparts, ministers from across the world. They're all looking at, CCS, direct air capture, et cetera. They're all looking at these technologies as ways to address their commitments under the Paris Agreement. Ultimately, our vision will involve testing and deploying these and building these technologies inside the United States, but there may be pieces that we can't do all fully inside the United States. We want the whole supply chain here, so we may have to partner with allies who have the same vision and share our values to be able to make that happen. But ultimately, we want to commercialize these technologies. We'd like to stamp them with Made in America, export them around the globe, and we'd like to do it by employing the citizens of the U.S. to make this happen. So not only does creating this carbon management economy put a lot of really, open the door, we should say, to a lot of high-skilled work, it also gives us a chance to rectify some of the harm that has been done by our dependence on fossil fuels and the emissions that they produce. So along with carbon dioxide, we can develop this technology to remove other pollutants from the atmosphere as well. And to begin to heal, we can use carbon management technologies, direct air capture, carbon capture, as a tool for advancing equity. And we want to see it deployed in collaboration with communities that are fence line communities that have been, bearing the brunt of living under smokestacks or carbon emission polluting, but also other particulate emission polluting industries. We want to be able to partner on this. And I really applaud the Institute for having that question be a component of this conference. I'll point you to, we are a big believer in place-based solutions in the Department of Energy in Bakersfield, California as an example, because they are really moving to this, in this space because they see this economy, this carbon management economy as an opportunity. They're training young people in it. The university and the community college are all involved in putting people to work in this space. They want to be a lead in it. And great for them, and we want to make sure that they are successful. And that's really, President Biden has a Justice 40 initiative, which means that 40% of the benefits of these big investments, $52 billion is going to come through the Department of Energy. We want the 40% of the benefits of these investments to go to communities that have been left behind and have borne the brunt of our fossil legacy. And so as we invest these billions from the infrastructure law that Brad is going to describe for you, we will prioritize proposals, and I say this to all of you who may consider applying to be part of this. We're going to prioritize proposals that offer the promise of environmental justice, of economic revitalization, of community participation, climate action. Our financial assistance will come with strings tied back to community benefits, just so that you know. So our hope is that these federal investments from the infrastructure law are going to crack the code on accelerating carbon management technologies, but ultimately the technologies are only going to go as far as the private sector will take them. We need more businesses like Oxy jumping in with both feet. I know that there are other policies that will spur private sector engagement, like enhancements for 45Q. I'm feeling pretty optimistic about that. We'll see what happens, but there has been, in our conversations on Capitol Hill around the design of the infrastructure law, we have heard a broad bipartisan level of agreement on carbon management that just doesn't emerge that often these days. From progressive Democrats to conservative Republicans, there is a real belief in the potential of these technologies and the desire to get this right. So I'm asking you to help us get this right. Work with us. Send us your ideas. Send us your proposals. Tell us what we're missing in this. Tell us what we should keep our eye out for. Your efforts have delivered carbon capture and carbon removal to this moment. And sometimes when you're in the middle of history, it's hard to tell that it's being written. But we are in a moment right now, and together, let us seize this for businesses, for workers, and for our shared home, which is this planet. Thank you all so much.